All right, so the first non-contiguous territory that we gained, other than a couple of islands in the Pacific that we got in the 1850s, is Alaska. Yay! We bought it.
Captain the Great.
Why did we buy it?
We wanted it.
It's free land.
It wasn't free.
It's land.
We bought it. Okay, who did we buy it from?
Russia.
We bought it from Russia. Okay, this is partly strategic interest. I've seen some books that said some people have still held the hope that we would fill in the part of Canada between Alaska and the continental U.S. I don't think the British would have given up British Columbia. But in 1867, basically this is during one of the worst presidencies in American history. His name was Andrew Johnson. He goes down as being like second worst president ever. But
Wait, who's the worst president?
the worst president ever is actually Warren G. Harding.
What do you do? Nothing?
We'll get there. We'll get there. All right. Andrew Johnson actually replaced Abraham Lincoln when Abraham Lincoln was assassinated. But the guy who actually facilitated this purchase is a guy named William Seward. They called this Seward's Folly because why spend all this money on Alaska, which was $15 million?
Same way, wasn't the same for
That's it.
Okay, which is super cheap. It's a couple of cents an acre, but what's the problem with Alaska?
It's cold.
It's far, far away,
We can't use it.
and it's super, super cold. In fact, they called it Seward's Folly or Seward's Icebox. I prefer that nickname for it because people thought this was foolish. Okay, that's Seward pulling the wheelbarrow, and that's Andy Johnson. Okay, unfortunately, it's a little pixelated. There was some other stuff there, but basically, there were a couple of things. Essentially, we bought this for strategic interests.
What's his name?
William Seward. And so we bought it as strategic interest. This was also removing Russia from the North American continent. Okay? Which Russia was one of those imperialist powers. Okay? So again, now somebody said it's got oil. We don't know there's oil there until World War II. Okay? Gold is going to be discovered there a little bit later. Okay? So at the time, this was a hard sell, particularly at a time when we're paying for debt from a war, the Civil War. But we do end up purchasing. It's called the Alaska Purchase Treaty, signed in 1867. Okay, oops, I thought I had one more slide on Alaska. And we gain it, and it sits there. It eventually becomes a territory. Just because we own it doesn't mean it's an organized territory, right? It just is. Yeah. When we say a territory, that's an organized territory. They have a constitution. They have a territorial governor, and they are working through the process of becoming a state. Yes, sir.
You said it removed Russia and what?
It removed Russia from the North American continent.
Yeah, was there another reason why we bought it?
Just they wanted resources and just the hope of land. Now, southern Alaska is vastly different than northern Alaska.
It's not that cool.
Southern Alaska, sometimes it's actually warmer in southern Alaska than it is here.
Similar.
Okay, it's very humid in the summertime. There's 8 bajillion mosquitoes. Beautiful, beautiful territory, but you had to be a certain kind of person to want to live there.
Isn't the sun out there 24/7
Yes, at northern latitudes, the days get very, very short in the winter and very, very long in the summer. And southern Alaska, you have, days where the sun doesn't set. You also have days where the sun doesn't rise, or it rises for 30 minutes. So imagine that. Yes, sir.
So during this time, because they didn't know anything about like gold or oil, they just kind of bought it and said, "Hey, we own this land."
Yeah, and some people started to move there. Initially, the people who moved there, they were like trappers, and they were harvesting the game and things like that. And they were hoping that there was going to be some minerals there because the mountains were similar to, say, the California and an extension of the Sierras. And eventually gold is found. We have the Yukon Gold Rush that occurs in the 1870s. And which, has anybody seen the movie Call the Wild?
Kind of.
Okay, if you haven't seen it, it's fantastic, but it's got the sort of the Yukon Gold Rush in there. Okay. And of course, if you've seen the sort of the lame Gold Rush Alaska show and stuff like that, it's still a nod to that, and gold is still one of the exports that they have out there. But oil is more important, and interestingly enough, our new president signed an order that shut down a pipeline project that would have made that oil easily come to the lower 48 for processing rather than being exported. So who knows? We'll see what happens. Also, with signing that, 11,000 jobs were gone with a signature.
Yeah.
All right. So,
yay. More jobs.
so we'll see. Anytime, any government action, it causes ebbs and flows. So it's one of those things to be watching. We'll see what happens there. So now we're going to shift gears to Hawaii. The Hawaii story is a lot better. Well, I don't know better.
The Hawaiian League.
It's more interesting than just a purchase because, we wrote a check, gave the Russians some stuff, and said, hey, thank you.
The Hawaiian League.
But basically, we got Hawaii. It's known as Crossroads of the Pacific, okay? Hawaii is out there, and Hawaii was of strategic importance for any ships crossing the Pacific. Why?
It's an island.
It's a good place to put in and get resources, okay? And also, if your ship broke down, you could go there and get it fixed. So Hawaii had been an independent nation. Okay.
Disgusting man.
All right. Sorry, it might be a little bit of a sexist image. Okay. All right. So anyway, now here's the thing with Hawaii. Hawaii had been an independent nation forever. It was a monarchy, a constitutional monarchy. Okay, and Europe. Not European, but American influence really started in the 1830s there when missionaries went to Hawaii to spread the Congregational Church. Okay? Now, the thing about Hawaii, it's in the tropics. Okay? And in the tropics, certain things will grow. Certain cash crops will grow in the tropics. So what cash crop do you think became important on the archipelago of Hawaii?
Pineapples.
It was sugar, okay? Sugar, which was one of the major cash crops that the Europeans made money off of during the colonial age, right? That's why the Caribbean was so important and still was very important during this time period, during the middle 19th century up into the 20th century, okay? Sugar, okay? Now, these missionaries, they were from New England. New England had strong ties to the sugar industry in the Caribbean, okay? New England actually was where rum was made from the molasses from the Caribbean until, yes, which is really weird because when we think about the colonial New England, we think of the Puritans being really religious. Well, they were making booze, okay? Now, eventually, that industry moves to the Caribbean. However, those people from New England still had knowledge of the sugar industry and ties to the Caribbean. So these people say, wow, the climate is perfect for growing sugarcane, and very quickly Hawaii becomes home to massive sugar plantations. Now, when I say plantation, being from the South, we automatically have a certain image that comes to mind, and it's usually tied to the movie Roots, okay? We usually think of slavery when we hear the word plantation. I want you to understand, all of you, plantations still exist today. I can get in my car and drive 15 minutes and be in the middle of a plantation down in Tunica County or even DeSoto County. Because a plantation is merely a farm that grows cash crops.
We had slave plantations.
Okay? Cash crops. So when I say a plantation, that means they're growing a cash crop. Those plantations, they're growing sugar. Okay? Now, just to let you know, because plantations do still exist, I can go down and be on a cotton plantation. I can be on a rice plantation. I can be on a corn plantation. Okay, now, so the thing is, that is a cash crop. And they only grow cash crops. Okay? Now, there was no slavery in Hawaii. It was outlawed by their constitution. No slavery. All right? Actually, Hawaiians, they worked for the sugar plantations for a while, but again, small population, fairly isolated population, there's not enough laborers. Where are the laborers going to come from? No.
From the islands?
After 1850, Japan. After Japan is opened for trade by the U.S., by Admiral Perry in the 1850s, Japanese laborers start to immigrate to Hawaii to work on the sugar plantations. Okay. Now, so here's the thing. The Hawaiian population, they kind of draw out of the sugar industry And now you have the Japanese going there. And the Japanese population of Hawaii is going to increase and increase and increase and increase. Actually, to the point that the Japanese, they make up about 25% of the population by the 1940s. Okay? So, but here's the thing. What I want you to understand is that the native Hawaiians, they start to have less of a voice in what's going on in Hawaii. Particularly because they end up with a king who sort of gives away the store, so to speak. They have a king. His name is King Kalakaua.
How you say that? Ain't Hawaii the Sandwich Islands?
Pretend you were trying to say something.
Okay,
and then you said
King Kalakaua.
Didn't he have a nickname?
I call him King Cal because Kalakaua, it's fun to say, it's harder to say. All right, so King Cal. Well, in the 1870s, King Cal, he amends Hawaii's constitution. Now, they were a constitutional monarchy. They had a parliament and all that kind of stuff. People were able to vote. It was a democracy, even though a limited democracy. But King Cal, under pressure from the sugar planters, amends the Constitution. Okay? So that only land owners can vote.
That sounds kind of, really
Yes, sir.
American.
Is that this is the one who like sold out, right?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Essentially. All right. So King Kalakui said only landowners could vote. Okay. He also did a good thing for the U.S. He allows the U.S. to build a naval base at Pearl Harbor. Okay. Also, he signs a reciprocity treaty with U.S. Okay, which means free trade, new tariffs.
What?
Okay. All right. Now, reciprocity treaty, essentially, the idea is, okay, if you don't put tariffs on us, we won't put tariffs on you. Okay? Why would no tariffs between Hawaii and the U.S. be a valuable thing?
Ain't no more, what you call it.
You don't have to pay for like
Maybe you should
sugar
talk about
production.
It makes the sugar cheaper, okay? Which for Hawaiian sugar planters, it was important that sugar be cheaper. And I'll give you an example over here on the map. Okay, so Hawaii is, far, far away, right? Because here's Hawaii. Okay, you're about 1,800 miles from San Francisco. Okay, so that's sugar. It costs money to ship the sugar from here to here, right? Okay, well, who's Hawaii's competition growing sugar?
The Caribbeans.
The Spanish in Cuba.
Oh, Cuba.
It's 90 miles from the U.S.
Cuba.
Okay, actually, it's a little further to actually get to an actual port at that point. But let's say you're 200 miles from the U.S. The shipping cost on a ship is much cheaper because it would actually go into probably Tampa or somewhere like that. Okay, so this, if there was a tariff on all the sugar, this sugar's cheaper, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but if there's no tariff on this sugar, it now can compete with that sugar. So that was important. The reciprocity treaties were important for the Hawaiian sugar planters. So yay, King Cal, he sort of gave away the store, didn't he? Now the tariffs, that kept them from collecting tariffs from U.S. goods, but it also drove that business up pretty good for the Hawaiian sugar planters. All right, well, King Cal dies.
Oh no.
That's a church. That's a church that the missionaries built. Yay! All right. So his sister, and this is an image of his sister. All right. First of all, let's talk about this.
Defamatory.
Is this an accurate depiction of Queen Liliuokalani?
No. Is it wait? Is that the Hawaiian League?
Basically, this is Liliuokalani, okay, and this is actually supporting the people overthrowing her.
That looks creepy though.
It says scandalous government. It says cross immorality. Basically, this was an attack on Queen Liliuokalani. Now, why was Queen Liliuokalani being attacked? Well, her brother had died. He left no heir, so she becomes the monarch, right? Queen Liliuokalani, she had this crazy idea that Hawaii was for Hawaiians.
Bull.
Heresy, right? Yes.
How do you spell her name?
I'll write it on the board.
It's on your what's called.
Okay.
Let's put Queen Lily.
I call her Queen Lily because Liliuokalani is hard to say, but it's. All right. Queen Liliuokalani, she becomes the monarch. She has this crazy idea that Hawaii should be for Hawaiians. I know. Crazy. Well, the sugar planters don't like this, particularly because she's saying we need to fix this constitution, get everybody voting again. And there's another reason that really sort of tips the scales. She has difficulty because the Hawaiians aren't really the ones that are able to vote.